Unless you're mixing music for a different type of animal, human beings are going to be listening to your mixes, and they have two ears. Essentially, on their head, they have a left channel and a right channel, and that's why it's important to create mixes by using the space between the left channel and the right channel of the intended listener to create space and intelligibility for all of the different types of tracks and instruments that you have in your project. Let me just illustrate this quickly by listening to our current mix, both in mono and in stereo, because, like I said before, I get a lot of mixes from people where all of the channels are panned center, so they have not taken advantage of being able to put different instruments in their own specific spatial area. So I'm going to go to the control room here, and I'm going to listen to this particular part of the mix by using the down mix presets of both stereo and mono. And to really hear this effect, you'll need to be using headphones or sitting in front of your stereo studio monitors. So in stereo, we're hearing that the drums have been panned to their own specific area of the left and right field. Also, the guitar effects are panning between the left and right channel, and different instruments have been panned to their own areas as well. But things really start to sound different when we listen to this in mono. All of a sudden, it just sounds really narrow and constricted. Let me switch back and forth quickly between those two so that you can hear the difference. So let me show you a few different ways to pan different types of instruments, and let's start with the drums, because a drum set, when you're standing in front of a real one, is stereo. Certain components of a drum set are on the left side of the room and on the right side of the drum set and so forth, so you're experiencing that in stereo. And the idea is to represent that stereo image for the listener in your recorded music. And if I were using a real drum set with real drum tracks in this project, I would have an individual channel for each of those drum components, and I could take the pan control and pan them into the area where I wanted them to be audible. But in this case, I'm using a VST instrument, and so I'll have to do the panning inside of that. So to do that, I'm going to click and hold on the E button, and I'm just holding my mouse button down, and that will reveal the VST instrument that is assigned to that channel. And here we're looking at the mixer of this particular VST instrument, but let's look at the kit itself. Here's what a drum set looks like from a drummer's perspective. So the hi-hats are to the drummer's left, and the floor tom is to the drummer's right. But most people, when they're mixing music, will not want to pan each of those instruments to the drummer's perspective, but rather the listener's perspective. In other words, it's going to be backwards from what we're looking at here. And that is represented here in the mixer of this VST instrument. Here, the hi-hat, which is on the left side of the drummer, is actually to the right side of the audience. Same is true of the high toms, and then the low toms go to the listener's left. The tambourine will go to the listener's right, and the woodblock will go to the listener's left, and so forth. Sometimes drum instruments have the ability to flip that around very quickly by shifting the left and right channels, but every VST instrument is a little bit different. So you can do that in the Cubase mixer if you want to do so. But another very common panning technique is to record two individual performances of a track and then pan them left and right, some degree of left and right. And I have done that in this particular project with these two guitar tracks. I'm going to solo each one of those, and each one was recorded at a different time. You can see they each have different take numbers, and I prefer to do it that way with two unique individual performances rather than just copying one to the other and then delaying them slightly. That's a different sounding effect. You get a much richer experience when you record two things at different times but the same performance, because then you can take those tracks and you can pan them hard left and hard right to really make a rich sounding experience for the listener. Right now, these two guitars are panned center, but if we listen to them and start to pan them apart, then you really get a thickening of that guitar performance. Let's listen to it in mono and stereo again. And the default panner for mono tracks is the standard panner. However, on stereo tracks, you can also change the panner type from a balance panner to a combined stereo panner. If you hover your mouse over the top of the pan control, you'll see a little drop-down menu, but only on stereo tracks. When you choose the stereo combined panner instead of the stereo balance panner, now you have a separate left and right control that you can drag separately, but you can also narrow the stereo track to something that is a little bit more mono or less stereo, and then you can move that overall image from left to right. And next I'll talk about panning multiple instruments.